Musa, the boy of the river. The child rescued from the waters, adopted by Queen Asiya, and raised in the golden halls of Pharaoh. He was the one prophesied, the one the priests feared, the reason countless Hebrew infants were taken. Yet he survived. A prince in name, a warrior in training. But beneath the fine robes and the title of royalty, there was a question that had always haunted him. Who was he, truly? Musa had always felt different. He lived in the palace, dressed in fine clothes, and was taught the ways of Egypt. But when he walked through the city and saw the Hebrew slaves, something inside him stirred, a feeling he couldn't explain. People whispered in the palace. Servants spoke in hushed voices, thinking he wouldn't hear. The child of the Nile, he is not like the others. He is the queen's son, but not of her blood. He had ignored these whispers for years, but sometimes, when Queen Asiya looked at him, there was sadness in her eyes, as if she was hiding something. Then there was Miriam, the Hebrew girl who had always been nearby when he was younger. She watched him in a way no servant should, as if she knew something he didn't. And the woman who had nursed him as a child, Jochebed, older, kind, but always distant. There was something in her eyes, not duty, not service, but something deeper, a motherly love. Her gaze held something he could not understand, a truth he was not ready to face. He had ignored these signs, pushed them away, but doubt is like a shadow. It follows, even when you turn your back. And then came the day everything changed, the day that shattered the life he had known. It was midday. The sun sat heavy in the sky as Musa walked through the outskirts of the city near a construction site, away from the noise of the bustling city, to clear his mind. But that's when he heard it. A whip cracking like thunder, a sharp cry of pain. He turned his head and saw it, near a construction site where slaves hauled massive stones under the scorching sun. A taskmaster stood over a Hebrew slave, his arm raised high, the whip striking again, and again, and again. No one stopped to help. No one even looked. This was Egypt. This was normal. But Musa's blood burned. The world faded. He stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. His breath quickened, his vision blurred. And then, one strike. A single powerful blow. The Egyptian fell. His body hit the ground. Still, silent. Musa staggered back. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. What had he done? People had seen him kill an Egyptian for a slave. This will not stay a secret. Secrets do not stay hidden in Egypt. Whispers travel faster than the wind. That night, Musa could not sleep. The weight of what he had done pressed on his chest. He sat alone, staring at his trembling hands. Was it justice? He wondered. Or was it a crime? His mind raced with questions, but deep down, something else haunted him. What would Pharaoh do when he will hear that Musa killed an Egyptian for a Hebrew slave? The answer, though unspoken, lingered in the shadows of his thoughts. He will show no mercy. That was not his way. The next day, he walked the streets again, restless. Two men clashed before him, one Hebrew, one Egyptian. Their grunts and curses filled the air. He stepped between them and asked, "Why are you two fighting?" The Hebrew man turned to him, eyes sharp with suspicion. "Why do you care? Will you kill me too, as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" The words hit Musa like a blow. His crime was already a common knowledge, and if the streets knew, the palace would know. And within the palace, the storm had already begun. The great halls of Pharaoh trembled with voices. The priests, the generals, and the advisors with their venomous tongues had gathered in Pharaoh's court. They circled like vultures. They had always watched Musa closely, always questioning his existence in the palace. He was a prince in name only. He was not Pharaoh's son. He was an outsider, a child of the river, and a man who showed kindness to those beneath him. And now, he had killed an Egyptian to protect a slave. "This is no accident," the high priest spat. "He walks among the slaves, he speaks to them, he pities them, he mourns their chains. What prince of Egypt bleeds for the wretched?" A chief advisor stepped forward. "Silence this now, or the slaves will whisper of a savior. They will say a prince has turned in their favor. If we let this pass, what will it lead to? Rebellion? Revolt? We must end this before it begins." Pharaoh sat on his throne, silent. He had always known Musa was different. He had tolerated it, but now that tolerance had reached its end. Another advisor stepped forward. "You spared him once, great Pharaoh. You allowed him a life in the palace, but he was never one of us. His heart beats for the slaves. This is treason. If he walks free, you endanger the throne itself." Pharaoh's fingers drummed against the golden armrest of his throne. His jaw clenched. Finally, Pharaoh's general spoke. "He has betrayed Egypt. If this crime is forgiven, what message does it send? That a son of the palace may kill one of our own for a slave without consequence? That an Egyptian life is worth nothing? If you do not act, Pharaoh, your enemies will." Pharaoh leaned forward, looked at the high priest again, and said, "Speak. What does the law say?" "He must face judgment." "The laws are clear," the high priest answered. "Bring him before you. Let all of Egypt see that not even the favored of the queen is above Pharaoh's law." Pharaoh exhaled slowly, and then he gave the command. "Find him. Bring him to me. He will answer for his crime." The council murmured in approval. The guards moved swiftly. The hunt had begun. Across the chamber, Asya stood silent. Her heart felt a grief she had never felt before. She had always known Pharaoh never truly saw Musa as a son. But now, in this moment, she saw something colder, something cruel. To Pharaoh, he was no longer a son of his queen. He was now only a threat. The city that once embraced him as a prince had now turned against him. Torches burned in the streets. Soldiers marched with purpose. The hunt had begun. Musa moved in the shadows, his breath steady, his heart pounding. The grand halls, the towering statues, the Egyptian streets. All of it felt foreign now. He was no longer a prince. He was a fugitive. He pressed himself against the cold stone walls, listening as footsteps passed nearby. He could not run. Running meant death. At one corner, a patrol passed. He ducked behind a pile of stacked pottery, waiting, listening. Every sound felt like thunder. Every moment stretched too long. Then, silence. The soldiers were gone. Musa exhaled, slipping through the back streets, past sleeping merchants, past empty stalls, past the life he once knew. The gates were too dangerous. He knew that. But there were other ways out. And then he saw it. A small, unguarded passage near the workers' district. A narrow path that led out of the city walls. His way out. Musa stepped through, careful, cautious. The moment he crossed, he turned back one last time. The city of Pharaoh, the home he had known all his life. All gone. The winds howled. The sands stretched endlessly before him. The night sky loomed above, vast and uncertain. With one last breath, he walked forward, into the desert, into exile, into the unknown.